I mean, let's face it, all this stuff comes down to the serenity prayer. Divest the energy I'm putting into things that I have not a chance in hell of controlling. And the list is endless and it's automatic. It's not like I'm consciously doing that. And then invest that same energy into things that I can do something about, and my life transforms.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety. Welcome to the pod. Good morning, Thom. How's it hanging?
I love it. Welcome to the pod. It's like, I'm happy to be here.
Sounds futuristic.
Well, it sounds better than what I was saying to somebody earlier. I'm off to cast my pod. And I thought, I better not ever say that again.
Same with how's it hanging? How's it hanging? It's just, brings to mind all kinds of awful connotations.
I've just started the second year with this book, and I'll recommend this to people. It's called The Daily Stoic. It's by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hasselman. January 29th. It's called Keep It Simple, which I immediately looked and said, each day presents the chance to overthink things. I'll stop there.
I'm always worried about underthinking things. So this is like a real problem because how do I find that happy medium between, the two extremes?
But you know what? I don't, and this, because the first thought I had when you said that was, I don't think we have the capacity, and maybe I'm talking about humankind, but I'm also talking about just knowing you and me. I don't think either one of us has the capacity to underthink things. I think our thinking is off, but I don't know that it's necessarily underthinking it. It's not getting focused on what we need to be thinking about. I mean, let's face it, all this stuff comes down to the serenity prayer. Divest the energy I'm putting into things that I have not a chance in hell of controlling, and the list is endless and it's automatic. It's not like I'm consciously doing that. And then invest that same energy into things that I can do something about, and my life transforms.
I heard somebody say in a meeting the other day, he kept saying, bring the body, to whatever problem you happen to be facing. Make yourself available even in your not comprehending to sort your way through the challenges.
Well, I think it also means come back to your body. Actually, my pinball mind was going crazy thinking about what we were going to do with today's podcast today, and I had 30 minutes to take a walk with Lucas, and I practiced one of the things that I've been practicing recently that's been amazing and challenging, and that is I just simply narrated my walk with the mantra. We did that thing with the YouTube thing not long ago about mantra psychology, and since we've done that, I've been really practicing it with it even more. And I was, and all I did in my mind was I went out to the observer self and just repeated, I'm walking this path. And I was being literal. This was not a metaphor, but I just kept saying it, and my mind would wander off. I'd come back instead of a breath counting meditation coming back to one. I would just come back to, and I would just be very tuned in to seeing the path that I'm walking, very familiar place out back on my property behind my house, and see Lucas up ahead of me running. I would watch this stuff, and I would just say, I'm walking the path. I'm walking the path, I'm walking the path. And then what I noticed, and I don't think this is here or there, but it was interesting to me. I began to notice that I was saying I'm walking I was saying I'm walking this path, and it changed to I'm walking the path. And the metaphor just sort of came in. It was sort of like if there's inner guidance, it's almost like, oh, this is a good one. Let's let you go with that one. I am walking the path, because that's being in the present. And it's like, it was so calm, and yet there's always that voice over there that says, I think we're supposed to be doing something else.
It's funny. The human brain is such a powerful machine. It's like a rodeo. We're like on top of it, trying to like get it to obey us. Yeah.
We're bull riders,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's what it feels like for me. But another aspect of underthinking versus overthinking is the dilemma of my addiction is that the things my brain told me were a good idea or that I ought to do for so many years were so toxic and awful that, and this is where I think, the work we've been doing Thursday nights about self-esteem has been really instructive, is that, learning to kind of trust your own point of view again.
So much of the earlier part of our lives, people can define it as living by default. It's like and it's fine. It's like the circumstances kind of nudge us this way and that way, and we're doing it. How did you become a therapist, Thom? It's like, well, it's sort of, it's like maybe there was some grand plan, but it's like, I never meant to do this. I don't have any memory whatsoever of making a conscious decision. It's like it got there by default. And so what you're talking about too is living, and when we begin to awaken, what we want to do is be aware of how we live by default. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. But we want to live by decision rather than default. And we want to basically say, no, I want to actually make more decisions about conscious decisions. And sometimes people are going back to that, like we're doing that before they hit addiction or they hit some other disturbance. But most of us, we never were there, And I have a feeling that, you can now with hindsight look back and say, I was doing the things my brain told me to do, but I'll bet you didn't think that way then.
Right. Well, it was there was an aspect of autopilot.
Yes,
where
autopilot's a good one.
Right,
Yeah.
I was just following, and I think I was talking to somebody about recovery yesterday, and we were just talking a lot about like the pleasure seeking drive rather than like divorced from like meaning or context but just being in a constant mode of needing to get loaded, needing to feel great, to needing to moderate whatever the stimuli was that was coming through. Paradoxically, if you're organizing your waking life around experiencing pleasure nonstop, you're not gonna have a very happy life. You're not gonna have a firm grip on anything, because like life is a peaks and valleys. It's you can't just you can't be at that pitch constantly.
To go back to the emotional sobriety sort of tenets is like that immediately leaves you with almost a constant, not take almost out, a constant unrealistic expectation. And the expectation is not that I'm going to feel good. The expectation is that I'm always going to, or that I'm always supposed to be. That's the point, or even the understanding or the belief that that's the point. Which, I mean, just what you just said, Patrick, in terms of, I mean, there's so many things we talk about in this stuff that comes back around and around. And as I pay attention to and listen to both participate in, but also listen to our conversations and go like, just that distinction, not even saying, instead of seeking pleasure as the point, seek meaning. We just creating the alternative, because I think a lot of times that's what personal growth work is, not just therapy, but personal growth work in general and Allen talks about this a lot and uses the term with the new possibilities. It's like, how would your life? I love questions like this that I call them magnet questions. Just like not rhetorical questions where you don't answer them, but just really answer them a lot over and over. And that is, how would my life be different if my ultimate measure was in finding meaning versus finding pleasure?
Yeah. I mean,
how much
the gamble I'm taking is that meaning is going to generate, I think, a lot more pleasure in the long term.
Well, but see, listen. So okay, we're my therapist self response here, so I'll just let him talk. It's like, yeah, but you just implied that pleasure is still the ultimate goal. So okay, is meaning going to take me to pleasure? It's like, no, we don't know that, but the other. So I would pose another magnet question, which is it possible that acquiring, gathering meaning, having the feeling of purpose and meaning is preferable to pleasure?
No, you're absolutely right. We need to uncouple those. I do recognize that. Yeah.
But I realize, but see, now this is a place where this is a good time just to remind people too, that don't get fucking lost in the language. It's like language limits everything. It's like, I mean, we've all had experiences, bad experiences, or hopefully many of us have had really good experiences that we will describe as really beyond description. And we mean it. I mean, we'll say that, we'll use that as an expression, but sometimes it's just like, I don't know how to put that into words. It's like, that's because language limits what we can do. It's like, I love language. I mean, that part I meant to do, not being a therapist, but being a writer, and doing that kind of work. I love what words do, but be aware that because I realized as I was asking you that question is that in my understanding of the language is I am suggesting in my language that acquiring sense of purpose and meaning is more pleasurable. Okay, so the idea is again, the word don't let the word pleasure get in the
Right.
way.
I like that expression. Don't get lost in the sauce. It's a good one.
I love that.
No,
Never
but
heard
I
that.
think of everything and many things. I'm always thinking about movies. For whatever
Mhm,
reason, we were talking about meaning versus pleasure.
mhm,
I
mhm,
just thought about that scene in The Shawshank Redemption when
mhm,
Andy cuts a deal with one of the guards uh, to draw up some papers, some tax return documents for one of the
mhm,
guys,
mhm,
in order for his working crew that are tar papering the roof to get some beers to
mhm,
celebrate, all the work they've been doing during the summer.
mhm,
And anyway, what ultimately happens is that the boys all get beers and they're kind of like celebrating at the end of a long day of toil. And one of the guys offers the beer to him, for cutting the deal,
mhm,
for
mhm,
organizing this
mhm.
whole thing, for what reason they have, God knows what.
Right,
And
right.
and he's like, nope, sorry, gave up drinking. But he just sits there with a little satisfied smile on his face. And the mission, the meaning being to give dignity to his
Mhm.
coworkers, and to kind of
Yes.
feel a part of again in this dehumanizing place. and
Mhm,
uh and I just love, like the little microcosm of that, of like, just
mhm,
finding a way to organize the material realm in a way that obeys your imagination, and kind of like, in this case, yeah, just reminds some
mhm.
people of their humanity. But he's not taking a
I bl-
drink because, yeah.
Oh, I love it. No, because yeah. And so all we need to do in this conversation is just say, just beware, don't get lost in the sauce is what you're saying. It's like, because the truth is, otherwise I get tongue tied trying to figure out if is meaning is, something that's meaningful and purposeful, pleasurable. It's like, go like, okay, well, if it's a short answer test, I'm saying, yep. But does it feel the same as what you and I are talking about when we're talking about seeking pleasure in our addictive days? No, it's not the same. It's not the same feeling.
Well, right, and pleasure, it's awful for me to say, or it really, it brings up a lot of dark feelings. But like, pleasure was what I would describe as pleasure back in those days. It wasn't. It was just like not engaging. It
Mhm,
was disengagement, and like a kind of staying out of the light. Which,
mhm.
I mean, how pleasurable is that really? I mean, it was really just kind of like, yeah, just trying to escape from consciousness.
Right,
Misery, pleasure, that form of
right.
pleasure for me was a form of misery, or it became that.
Well, that's a beautiful way to say that, because it's like, because it's avoidance, it's isolation. And one of the things, that I've told people for years is, my depression can't kill me, my should monster can't kill me, my addiction can't even kill me unless it's coupled with isolation. As long when if I'm having a bad day with any one or all of those things, if I am in touch with you and telling you what's going on with me, I'm safe. I'm good, and I still have that connection. The danger part is if I buy into that message inside my head, that culprit that tells me, that no, they're not going to understand, or you don't want them to know, or whatever that is. It is the isolation that is
Yeah,
ultimately the killer, and that's one of well, there's a couple of things going on. I want to go back to watch me not go off on the bunny trail. It's like what you just said about because I thought about another way of that. What we used to define as pleasure is no pleasure is not pleasurable. But things that I used to define as, and this is just human development too, not just addiction recovery, but it's like I make the joke sometimes that I'll say, like, if my younger self knew what I considered a really good weekend, he would blow his brains out. It's like the idea, home, Dee Dee and I hanging out here with the dog and cats and horses, and going, falling asleep with a book on my chest at 9:30 at night. It's like.
But wait, Tom, like, I bet there were moments where that former self wanted to like, or wished that he could have been the type of guy who liked that sort of thing.
Well, I don't know if I don't think he was smart enough for that, but the idea is, if there were a way, rather, again, this is beyond language. If I were having if I were going back in time and having a conversation with him, if I had a way of conveying to him the feeling that I have on a Friday or a Saturday like that, then he would want it. But the words themselves, we're not at a party, we're not hanging out, we're not drinking or drugging or doing that. It's horrible, but it's like, but that's a good point. The idea that if we were to introduce what I really mean by that, check this feeling out, and I give you the Vulcan, whatever the Vulcan thing is, you give you the feeling, you go like, oh man, that's great, because what is that? Well, it's kind of high, it feels, I mean, I describe taking these walks out, I talk about those a lot of times, because I take these walks out in back of my house with my dog. It's like I feel that gets me high.
Yeah, I mean, I relate to so much to what you're saying. I didn't. Now, IRS, if you're listening to this podcast, I took care of all my business, and I've got the receipts to prove it, so don't come after me. But when I was towards the end of my addiction, or before my sobriety date, however you want to put it, I hadn't filed for like several years, or I was like, I was not in any kind of state to be answerable to
right.
I don't know how else to put it. That was one of the things that I was thinking about and talking about in the first meetings I was going to, and in therapy, was like, this is bullshit. Like, doing my taxes every year, doing all the things that we do to run our lives, all of the necessary business, is like, well, why wouldn't I want to just like forego that completely and just like fall into a scumbag vortex? But now I'm very answerable to taxes and laundry and all the the many things that like I wouldn't put on in the column of like awesome fun activities.
Does it feel good to get your taxes done? It's like, hell yeah. I can say that with great enthusiasm. It's like, because I know that feeling, and I get that. And it's like, but if you say is that pleasant? You go like, well, if I'm really being, the short answer is sure, but it's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. For you and I, it's not because we're loyal and we want to be sure the government has plenty of money. It's like, it's because we feel good about ourselves being responsible.
Like, I mean, I'm sure I could play it out like the civic principle of it or whatever, but that's not really what it's about. It's about a sense of belonging, and let's all get fucked together.
Yeah. Well, it's because we go, because you and I know we could go home and do a different podcast entirely and say, now let's talk about if what a sense of responsibility would be if I'm going to give you my money. I need and the way the representation system is set up right now, I need much more. I need a much greater way of participating and helping to decide how the money is spent. Because our system of representation no longer does that.
No, absolutely not.
Those people are not the representatives don't really pay that much attention to what we might want, how we might want our money spent.
They're lighting it on fire. They rolled it into a giant joint and they're smoking it in front of us. That's the way I look at it.
That's right. That, my friend, is the sub podcast within the podcast today, and we're gonna call it something. Patrick just named it. It's the only thing I've written on my pad so far: Scumbag Vortex.
Yeah, that'd be a good name for a podcast. So I'm gonna try not to.
Join us for. Welcome. Get our radio voices going. Welcome to Scumbag Vortex.
That's a great radio voice. I want to hear you sell me toothpaste now.
Yeah, that's right.
But I wanted to run this by you. I believe it was Roger who said it last week, and maybe Richard Warner the week before, had brought this up. But the idea of emotional sobriety as a practice, and thinking of it as a practice rather than like, and maybe I should just speak for myself, but like, I have the habit of conceiving of emotional sobriety as like this this plateau that I'm going to arrive at some point, and be free of my emotional dependency, and run my life in this way where I'm like Neo, and I'm I'm just like not like not falling prey to just to any of like the unhealthy dependence and the unreasonable demands that come from not being differentiated. But I was just like encouraged when Roger, who's somebody who like speaks as eloquently about emotional sobriety as anybody I've ever heard, to talk, to say that it's an attempt that he makes that he doesn't always succeed in. And I'm emotionally extremely emotionally dependent and like very in the weeds, I think, for a lot of my some of my most important relationships. I don't feel especially differentiated on some days, and I struggle a lot, and but if I can think of emotional sobriety as a practice and just something I can keep striving towards, then I can see the light in that. But it's hard, man, when I think of, and I actually do hear it sometimes in the meetings and whatnot when people will talk about it. We're all kind of yearning to like be emotionally sober, and but it can be difficult because like sometimes we fall very short of that goal.
Well, I think this is one of the most important things for us to be talking about consistently through all of this stuff. And I agree with you that Roger does a beautiful job of when Roger speaks. I used to have a friend who say like his definition of genius was, you're a genius because you're thinking like me. It's like, it's like what a great ego thing. And so, I mean, there's so many things that he says and he can put into words, and that's part of what we want to do. And I always feel good if I can do that with, you can do that with your work as a writer. It's like, you put into words something, people go like, oh yes, that's it, but they didn't have just the correct, we didn't have scumbag vortex until just a few minutes ago. And it took two of us to get it, one of us to say it and the other one to hear it. And write it down. So now you and I have to figure out what we're going to do with scumbag vortex. It's like, it would make a great short story, I think, at least. But emotional sobriety, this is where there needs to be room for all of us. I mean, it's like, when I say this, I speak only for myself, like you said. I'm not speaking for you or for Allen. It's just like, emotional sobriety is a way, and you do hear people say, how's your emotional sobriety? What we're seeking is always right there in the middle of us. It is our ultimate truth about ourselves as human beings, at where we are. In my philosophy alone, it's like connected to all other things and beings, and we're part of ironically sort of an undifferentiated understanding that we get differentiated in order to find our place in the whole. So it's the very first thing in the first book I ever wrote, Simple Truth: before we are one, we are many. And I'm not sure I knew what that meant at the time, but I do now. At least I know what I think it means at this point, which is the fact that we understand all the parts, because we can't get rid of any of that, and we're going to do that. So we use all that we learned to as we go through the day, to live as closely as we can to that center point. To the it's the and in the book I wrote called Earning Your Own Respect, I think it's the first time I used that concept of this thing running down the center of us. And the idea is, if there was really a measurement, what we could do, if there was some kind of MRI that could look at that and see all that stuff, we could look at the conversation you and I are having, or just when we finish it, we look at it and go like, and when there would be a line for each of us there, and we would see we're going on either side of it all the time. Oh, look at that moment in time when you said that line. Whoa, man, Patrick, you were there. It was perfect. It was like you were right there. But the truth, you weren't there for long, and you weren't, but then, you're not far off at all. But it's like we're coming and going, and we're doing in the way that's because I'm just so fucking addicted to metaphor and analogies. Is I liken this to like watching a tight wire walker work. It's like, they stay so steady and walk down this tightrope. But if you look at them, if you think about what they're doing, they're never still. They're never right in the middle. They're always or hell, even just take an example of something we all do every day, driving a car. You hold your wheel steady. No, you don't. You're constantly exhausting it, but but you don't have to concentrate. We had to concentrate on it at first when we were first learning, but no, there's a mastery of that is inside of us, to where we can even fucking space out and be thinking about anything else and not even know we're driving, and we're staying right in the middle of the road where we're supposed to be.
Thank God for that, because I space a lot while I drive. I'm glad I'm not pancaked somewhere.
Yeah, and it's like but the truth is, the point being there is that we come and go from it all the time, and we try to be as congruent with we can. And what I want people to know when I'm talking to my clients about this stuff is that doesn't mean like, oh, you can look forward to being in this space of wisdom or emotional sobriety, maybe in a few weeks. It's like, no, you could be there right now. You can, in the course of a conversation I have with a client, there may be times where if there was a need, if there was a measurement, or if there was a need for a measurement, I could say that, maybe that client was in a better position with their relationship to their core, their center, than I am in that moment. It's like, all right, but that's, what we're doing is we're trying to help each other hold that balance, to stay on our own tight wire, and
I love the metaphor of the tightrope walker. Another one just came to me, which is I love those Song of Ice and Fire books. And when Jaime Lannister loses his sword fighting hand, he has to learn to sword fight. He's one of the best sword fighters in the Seven Kingdoms. Then he has to learn to use his left hand, and everything's different. Everything's turned around, and he's like, he's terrible at it. I feel like emotional sobriety, because it's so counterintuitive to kind of like, the matrix of dependency that we've had through most of our lives, that it's like, we're needing to train ourselves essentially to like, sword fight with the left hand, or writing with the left hand, that's another way of using the metaphor. But
that's right. No, that also brings into the neurological. I mean, it's like I understand the metaphor part, but it also brings into the literal, the body again, and the neurology of that. The neurological truth about that is for years, one of the ways that I have taught people about the practice, I'm sure I probably bored you with this many times, is how to move from what do we call not original to me, but unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. We know what we don't know, and we feel really bad. And that's when awareness starts to ruin everything for us. And then with practice, if you can learn how to practice, you practice something, and this can be recovery, or this can be learning how to drive a nail into wood without hurting your hand. It's like then you move to conscious competence, where you're doing it right, but you have to think about it. And then with steady practice and with repetition, you move to unconscious competence.
When Allen said practice makes practice recently, or I've heard that, and it sounds really good, but what does like practice makes practice mean to you?
The practice of brushing my teeth, the practice of sitting on my rowing machine and using my rowing machine to exercise, the practice of walking my dog, the practice of driving a car. Probably better to say practice is practice. It's a redefinition of the word, and we are being contaminated by perfectionism with practice makes perfect.
To strive for perfection is okay, right? If we acknowledge that we're never going to get there.
You even let that go. I mean, again, this is language. We can always do that. The perfectionist doesn't say, do it. Oh, good. You got it. You got that just right. I'm so proud of you. The perfectionist basically will get people to be major procrastinators, because what the perfectionist principle is, your greatest accomplishment is now your minimal expectation. So if you've never hit a 10 on a 10 scale and you hit it one time, rather than say, hey, you did that, it's like, okay, well, that's the bottom line now. You always have to do at least 10.
It's not reasonable. It's not a reasonable bar to set things at.
No, it actually creates, it actually works exactly the opposite of what we want. It creates pain, and it creates, because of that, pain increases our self-absorption, and it's supposed to. When we hurt, we pay attention to ourselves.
You don't practice in the pursuit of perfection, some idea of perfection. You do it for its own sake.
Even just showing up without being in the mood to read these lines. And if I do that, even if I don't feel anything from that, even if I just feel inconvenience, what I believe, if I'm doing it every day and I'm being consistent and I'm being constant, not just consistent, but constant with it, it's benefited me just the same as exercise does. It doesn't matter whether I'm in the mood.
It took me a long time to even have an inkling of what that meant. Hopefully I'm getting close to it.
Yeah.
Well, next week, Allen will return, just like James Bond. And we thank you so much for listening today.
Absolutely. Peace out.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.